So today I want to talk about the Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation. Disclaimer, I'm not a theologian, I'm not a philosopher, I'm just a normal guy like all of you guys. And like many of you, I encounter these claims online from Roman Catholics and others, and I'm just trying to sort through them myself. So these are my thoughts on the Roman Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation as I understand it. So to start off, in order to understand the doctrine of transubstantiation, we need to understand Aristotle's substance-accidents distinction. So to Aristotle, a substance defines what a thing is, but the accidents encompass any physical attributes of a thing. So for example, a dog, what it is, a particular dog, but it might have various accidents. So it might be a certain color, it might be black, it might be a certain size, its hair might be of a certain length. These accidents could in principle change and the dog would still be a dog. We could take another example of this cup of water. It might have various accidents, its temperature, the amounts, maybe the cloudiness. But let's ask a further question. What about the fact that water is made of H2O? You might be tempted to say, okay, well, that's got to be part of the substance. That's part of what a thing is. That's what water is. It's H2O. But you'd be wrong. Aristotle would say that H2O is actually an accident of water. The fact that water is made of H2O is an accident. Maybe it's a very important accident. You could say it's an essential, or it's a necessary accident or something like that, but it's still an accident. It's not essential to what water is. Very weird. So then what is water? Well, according to Aristotle, I guess water is just, it's the substance of water is just whatever is underneath the physical characteristics of water. It's this very elusive and hard to define thing. All right, what is water apart from any physical attribute whatsoever, including the fact that it's made of H2O? In addition, substance is what individuates one thing from another. So if I have two separate glasses of water, then those are two distinct substances. But if I combine them, then there's I guess just one substance. And the more I've thought about this, it starts to sound like substance is almost like the soul of an inanimate object, as if we're saying that inanimate objects have souls. You think of a soul in the case of a human, right? A soul is immaterial. It's what makes a person what they are, and it's technically independent from the physical attributes that we normally associate with people, right? For example, as Christians, we would say that life begins at conception. Well, that one-celled embryo does not have any of the features we normally associate with humans. Doesn't have legs, hands, eyes, a face, a brain even. Yet we say that is a human substantially, right? Why? Because there's a soul attached to that body. Or you might think of the case of a conjoined twins. They kind of share a body, yet they are two distinct people because they have two souls. So again, soul is kind of what distinguishes, what individuates people. But now we're saying that inanimate objects have souls. That just raises all kinds of very strange questions. Like, what makes kinds of souls different? Why is the soul that's inside this water different than the soul of, say, a rock or a log? What makes the soul different if not any of the physical attributes of the thing? What makes different kinds of souls different? Like, is a water soul different from a seawater soul? Or are those the same kind of soul? Right? And if they're different, then how much salt would I have to add to this water to turn this into a different kind of soul? It's very strange. If I take this water cup and I pour it out into two different cups, am I creating a new soul? And then if I recombine the water cups, am I destroying a soul? It makes sense for certain things. I think Aristotle's system could work for something like, think of a statue of a horse. What is a statue of a horse? Well, it can be made from different materials. It can have different shapes. There's not a very strict mechanical definition that I can give you of what is a statue of a horse at its essence, right? It's sort of this abstraction from any kind of particular physical attribute. But it doesn't make sense for other things like water. And I would argue also in the case of bread and wine, which we'll get to. All right, so transubstantiation. So to start off, we need to be committed to the idea of Aristotle's substance and accidents distinction. So we need to accept that as true or as coherent. I think that's already a difficulty for me. In transubstantiation, the idea is that the bread and the wine are substantially change. The substance of bread and the substance of wine change into the substance of Christ's body and the substance of Christ's blood at the consecration, so that those two things are no longer bread and wine. They still are materially bread and wine. They have all the material of bread and all the material of wine, what Aristotle would call the accidents. So the accidents remain, but the substance, what they are underneath, right, is changed. So as you discussed previously, making the analogy between substance and soul, it's almost like we're saying that this bread has a bready body, but also a bread soul, and that bread soul gets swapped out for the soul of Christ's body, and the soul of the wine gets swapped out for the soul of Christ's blood, but the body remains that of bread and wine. So very, very, very bizarre. By my lights, wine just is a particular physical material. It's fermented grape juice. That's what it is, essentially. There's no essence, there's no soul underneath that makes wine what it is, right? It just is a physical material. So if you say that you have the physical material of wine, then you do have wine by definition, right? That's how I understand that. And the same with bread. So if Catholics are saying, look, you have the physical material of wine, you have fermented grape juice, but it's not wine, well, to me, that's just incoherent. But now we get into the problematic part. So remember this concept of substance and accidents, kind of like body and soul. You have this body of material attributes attaching to this soul, this substance, right? You might assume that what Catholics are going to say is that, look, the soul, the substance of bread, is changed into the substance of Christ's body. The material, all the physical attributes of the bread, they now are attached to the soul, the substance of Christ's body. But they don't. That's not what they say. They say that these accidents, they don't inhere in, that's Aristotle's language, they don't attach to anything. They're not attached to a substance. They're not attached to a soul. They don't inhere in anything. They're floating accidents. This is deeply, deeply problematic. We've dogmatically bound people to a particular system, and we've broken all the rules of that system. So the reason is that if we said that the accidents of bread, right, the attributes of bread attach to and herein the substance of Christ's body, we would then have to say that Christ's body is bready. Christ's body is, has gluten. Christ's body is made of wheat. We would have to attribute to Christ's body all the things that we normally say about bread. And Aquinas did not want to do that. So he said, look, they don't inhere in anything. These accidents are just floating accidents. They're not attached to any kind of substance. This doesn't work. This, by definition, breaks all the rules of what substance and accidents are, right? So accidents, first of all, accidents are abstract properties. Think of like greenness. I can't have greenness itself. Greenness itself does not have a particular location in space and time, right? It needs to be attached to something. I need to have a green thing, a green leaf, a green book, a green something, right? I can't just have greenness itself here in my hand. Oh, here's greenness. No, it doesn't work, right? Accidents, by definition, need to inhere in something. They need to be a part of a substance in order to have reality in time and space. It doesn't make sense to say that you have accidents that they exist in time and space, but they're not substantial. They don't have any substance underneath them. Catholics try a couple things to get around this. They're aware of this problem. One thing they try and say is, well, look, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. This is a miraculous change. The normal rules don't apply. Well, this doesn't work. We can't appeal to miracles to resolve metaphysical difficulties, right? Or logical difficulties, right? God cannot create a square circle. God cannot create a married bachelor. That's not because God lacks the power. That is because those things are logically impossible, right? God cannot create an insubstantial substance, right? If something has independent existence in time and space, and there are accidents associated with it, it is by definition a substance. Saying that, it has all those characteristics, but it's not a substance, that's just incoherent. That's like saying there's someone who's married, but who is a bachelor, right? There's someone who has a wife, but is a bachelor. That's incoherent, right? There's something that is perfectly round, but is a square, right? It's not a coherent statement, and no amount of miracles will resolve that problem. That's a logical contradiction. What Aquinas does to resolve this problem is he basically does exactly that. My understanding is he essentially defines this other thing, which is identical to a substance, in that it can have independent existence in time and space, and accidents can be attached to it in some way. But he doesn't call it a substance. So it's a non-substantive substance. And this just doesn't work. And Jean-Luc goes into this in more detail. I'll link to his video, right? Why Aquinas' solution to this problem does not work. The other thing that Catholics will sometimes say is, well, look, maybe the accidents do inhere in something. They inhere in the substance of Christ's body and the substance of Christ's blood, but they inhere in a sacramental way, in a mysterious way, right? We still don't want to say that, look, Christ's body is bready, Christ's blood is alcoholic. But look, they inhere in some mysterious sacramental way. Now, I'll critique this view later. So I want to make the point that if we have this understanding of just floating accidents, first of all, we have dogmatically bound people to a problematic metaphysical system. We have then proceeded to break all the rules of that system. And then, at the end of the day, we have failed to answer the question that we set out to answer. We have failed to answer the question of what is the relationship between the thing the priest holds and Christ's body. You might be tempted to say, oh, look, the thing that the priest holds is Christ's body. But no, the thing that the priest is holding is a bundle of floating accidents. They don't inhere in or attach to Christ's body in any way, right? So there's no connection between the thing the priest is holding and Christ's body. Think about that. Like you've failed to answer at the end of the day the question that we've set out to answer. One more point I'd make is that Catholics like to critique alternative views. For example, a couple other alternative views are consubstantiation and impanation. So consubstantiation is it's a both and view. Lutherans are sometimes accused of believing this, although I think Lutherans would say they don't believe in that. The idea is that the substance of bread exists alongside somehow the substance of Christ's body. They're both co-present, and how they're connected is that's sort of another question, right? That's sort of another problem that gets raised there. But so bread is substantially present, Christ's body is substantially present. What Catholics have effectively done is they've said, look, we have floating accidents. So we have accidents but they exist in time and space. They have independent existence in time and space. And we have accidents associated with that, particular thing in time and space. So we have, by definition, a substance. We have something substantial. By definition, that's what substance means. So you have consubstantiation. You have substantial bread, even though you don't want to say that's substantial. And then you are saying that also we substantially have Christ's body. That's consubstantiation, right? And again, we now need to answer the question of how those two things are connected. If instead we go with the other view, right, that the accidents sacramentally inhere in Christ's body, then we have impanation. So impanation is another view. It's related to incarnation. If you think of the incarnation, the idea is that Christ is fully God and fully man, right? The godness of Christ does not diminish his humanity, and the humanity likewise, right? That it's a both and view, fully God, fully man. So in a kind of analogous way, we would say that the bread is fully bread and fully the Lord's body, and same for the wine. The way I like to think of this is you could think of maybe like an extension of Christ's body. So you could think of, like, for example, I have a metal implant. There's a metal rod in my body. Before it was just a metal rod. It is still a metal rod, but now it is part of my body. It did not change. It did not become something else. It's still a metal rod, but is now a part of my body. Or you could think of a knee implant. It's this, plastic piece. It remains a plastic piece, but now it becomes a part of your body, right? So you could think of impanation that way. We have we have bread and wine, which are in some mysterious way, they are sacramentally united to Christ, such that they are part of his body, or they are his body. Anyway, if we say that the accidents sacramentally inhere in Christ, then we do have impanation. That is exactly what we have, and we would have to say that in some sense Christ's body is bready. Christ's body is, Christ's blood is alcoholic. That you can't get around that, right? Any other view is just wanting to have it both ways, is kind of failing to answer the question. All right, so that's my critique. We have bound people dogmatically to a problematic metaphysical system. we have proceeded to break all the rules of that system. And at the end of the day, we have failed to answer the question we set out to answer. So that's my critique of transubstantiation. If I've misunderstood anything or I've misrepresented the view, please, I'd love to hear from you Catholics. What do you think? Yeah, that's it.